begin with study of Zerg versus Terran, playing LingBaneMuta in Legacy of the Void, thinking about unit management, droning, and transitions to fight and survive and be stronger than the Terran, which is fairly difficult. You could say ZvT as a matchup in general is pretty hard for both players. There are a lot of really strong timings, a lot of really deadly tactics that are new to Legacy of the Void, but then a lot of the old styles, say Marine Mine Medivac of Heart of the Swarm, is still totally viable and quite strong. So, bearing in mind all these things, I'll kind of go over the decision making in the matchup and kind of macro, micro, tech, economy, and all that. So the first two overlords I send out. This one is going to be tucked kind of behind the opponent's third. The reason I don't fly it directly to this area is because I don't want to lose it to Marines. This overlord, I'm scouting this proxy barracks location. Terran players who go for 4 barracks at Marine will usually put it here. After this overlord checks that location, it will be rallied near the main so it can scout later on. My opening build was 17 hatch, 18 gas, 17 pool, and then 4 lings whenever the pool is done. That's taking the overlord at 19 supply. The reason I expand down here is because this Reaper can be pretty annoying, delaying your third hatch. Having the third here means it's very difficult for the Reaper to pass 2 queens, to pass the lings, and harass this drone, going to your third base. This also creates more progress for the creep toward the opponent. You could think about the first creep spread goal is to creep connect all of your bases. So when you have a fourth, you want to make sure you have creep all the way up to that area so your units can rush to defend it really quickly. But in the mid to late game, when you're trying to push the Terran with tier 3 units, you want to creep past mid-map, creep here, and be creeping to strike at their 5th base. On this map, the 4th base is very, very easy to defend. If they make this a planetary, they turret up this ridge. This choke is really poor to leverage attacks through, and this area they can usually just slap a planetary like right here and be really safe. So my plan is basically to drone as hard as I possibly can and make units whenever the Terran forces me to make units. The Lings push back the Reaper when they get speed. I'm continuing to drone. The point where I take gases is when I hit 2 base mineral saturation. So at this point, I grab 2 more gases, and I refill the gas in the main. I should make another queen. Having one of your hatcheries producing queens constantly is a good sort of rule, so you'll be able to afford spending all your larvae into drones, and also establish some creep queens and inject queens in the game. One personal leak for me in ZvT was not injecting my 3rd base in a timely manner. If you take this 3rd at a pretty early time, it's a really nice source of larvae. And in Legacy of the Void, they changed the number of larvae you get per inject from 4 in Heart of the Swarm to 3. So injecting is that much more crucial. 4-minute scout is kind of the key timing, so I sacrificed this overlord. I saw barracks and factory and another production facility already up and running. Usually they'll place the 3rd orbital here. Sometimes they'll hide it back here, but I can kind of infer, based on the fact that this production is already up and running, there are already units here in the base, and there are units here on my side of the map, that they're being quite aggressive with about 2 base economy. Let's take a look at the actual setup. Yep, there's 1 more barracks in the back, no gases at the natural, and no 3rd CC to speak of. So in this scenario, really just finding a way to defend your 3 base saturation is kind of the goal. I built a Roach Warren when I was supply blocked and floating some money, just in case there was a Hellbat attack of some kind, but the opponent's going to YOLO their Hellions into my worker line, and I'll end up killing them, so I don't need the Roach Warren for that. I'll be able to cancel it. As an order of gas spending, I like taking Ling speed first, so you're safe against things like 3 Rex Reaper. And then once you're back on gas, you can take Lair next, and then take a Bane Nest with your next 50 gas after Lair. Range Liberator timings can be a pain in the ass. If you have a Lair at a pretty reasonable time, you can get a spire out and then be able to defend that. The YOLO Hellions were dealt with, so I'm not quite worried about Hellbats anymore, so I don't need to make Banes blindly. There's a key moment where I get vision of a couple Medivacs going to attack, but basically what I can infer from the scouting information that I have is that it's not mech, it's bio. They're probably going to be pretty heavy on Marines, based on the fact that they're low economy. At this moment, I spread out Ling vision. There's one Ling at the 4th, one Ling at the exit of this choke, one Ling at this attack lane, one Ling at the 5th, and one Ling at the 3rd. So in the early game, if you don't have Overlord speed, Lings are a much more mobile scouting option, and they fill a similar amount of vision. Seeing this drop here lets me know that, well, there could be Marines and a Widowmine, or just pure Marine. So I need to dedicate some units to the main. The way that I divide the responsibility of my army units is I set up 2 control groups. I don't have a spire, I don't have mutas, so I can put some Lings on my muta hotkey and some Lings on my army hotkey, and that'll give me basically 2 arms of defense, so I can defend potentially 2 drops. If it was 2 Medivacs, then I could probably concentrate all my Lings in one place. But I see here, there's a Medivac on the left, and there's a Medivac on the right. So I have my hatches, my Lings for one group, and then a second group of Lings. I like to add in maybe one of the Creep Queens to these groups so they can shoot at the Medivac. My spores are positioned to deal with drops. You would think about the architecture of this map. There isn't very much dead space down here at the bottom, but there's quite a bit on this side, so usually putting the spore here is good, and then a spore here in the main. Having it probably on this ridge would be even better. Thinking about Overlord vision. If a Terran player opens Viking and you have a bunch of Overlords on the map, Sloverlords that is, they can shoot them down and you'll be in a bad spot. So before Overlord speed, prioritize placing Overlords around the perimeter of your territory. So the dead space here, maybe I could put one here as well. I have an Overlord here to give some advanced forward vision, an Overlord here to see drops on this side. We could even put an Overlord here as well. You can keep teching, you can keep spending, even though Terran is being aggressive with bio, even though Terran is on 2 bases. The only thing this 2-base aggression does is delay my muta production cycle. If they're going to be aggressive with bio, I'll just make a lot of LingBane, and I'll be safe. I can still take my spire upgrades, I can still take evo chamber upgrades, take all my gases and keep droning, but I do want to make sure I have enough LingBane to deal with these drops. And then this spore ends up getting 2 Medivac kills. What a god. Good job, little spore crawler. Sweet. So now that that's been dealt with, I know that I have a tremendous lead. Even if you're really far ahead, if Terran is going bio with Widowmines and whatnot, you don't really want to shove into them prematurely. If you have advantages, rather than necessarily try to kill them, you can extend that advantage by continuing to take upgrades, by adding a macro hatch and getting more larvae. My creep could be a little bit better this game, but taking the 4th at a little bit later of a time against 2-base Terran is pretty wise. I'm not in a rush to take the 4th if I'm already ahead on 3-base economy. This base isn't even saturated yet. So I like taking Carapace on the Spire. Carapace allows your mutas to fight directly against opponent units better. The attack upgrade means they're going to be harassing and killing buildings and SCVs at a faster rate, but if they ever have to trade with Liberators, having the armor upgrade is a bit better. And once my mutas are out, I remove those Lings from the muta group and just add them to the army. And now I'm in a good spot to drone the 4th base. So a key move that's much more crucial in Legacy than it was in HOTS is transferring some workers from your main to your 4th whenever your 4th is up and running and defended. The bases have less resource than they did in Heartless Swarm, so the main mines out faster. Whenever your 4th is up, just transfer 8 to 10 workers to the 4th base and then drone it up so it's at a clean 16. You can take your gases after that, but really making sure you have about 3 base mineral saturation at least, probably more like 3.5, so you can keep taking gases, and so you can keep producing units. Having around 70 drones is pretty good if you're against a low economy bio style like this one. You can go up to 80, you can go up to 85. Some of that comes down to personal preference. I have an overseer in the back here. Mainly I'm trying to keep track of how many gases the opponent has, and also maybe throw a contaminate here or there in the mid and late game. Based on the way that the Terran is open, based on the timing of their third, I can make some inferences about their economy, and I can basically pretty safely say that I'm ahead. With LingBaneMuta, if you have 2-2 and you have Carapace upgrade, you're not in a huge rush to go for Hive. LingBaneMuta is pretty strong on its own. The main thing you want to remember is having a couple overseers with your mutas so you don't die to mines. Whenever you have about 14 mutas, you can kill mines before they detonate, so that's a good threshold to start being active and poking the Terran base. Another thing to bear in mind when you have mutas in the game is to make sure you point them to a safe place before you go back to your macro. So these mutas are harassing the Terran base. I don't want to leave them somewhere like here or here, where bio could very easily just stim and run under the mutas and kill a bunch of them. Using the dead space to kind of idle the mutas while you go and inject your bases, while you take a new base and keep teching up. So like here, I run the mutas back and then I go to my army, I spread some lings around. Here I decided to take a trade. This isn't a favorable trade for me in terms of the cost of my units for the amount of damage that I deal, but I'm so far ahead that by clearing out this supply, I can make more units and better units to counter the opponent's composition. Since they're liberators, I can make some corruptors, and I have +2 armor from the spire, which means my corruptors are going to be pretty strong. My hive is late here, and that's just a mistake. Ultras, Broodlords are both really good in the late game, so getting a hive at a reasonable time is pretty wise. Also, pathogen glands and infestors. Infestors in general are just a really nice way to round off your composition and also give you more power to end the game against Terran. So, Defender's advantage means that Terran can wedge their bio between their buildings and deny a lot of surface area from your lings, from your ultras, and your ground army. Having infestors punishes them for clustering in these tight chokes. Like having a bunch of bio at this top ridge of this ramp means they can defend a very large army with few units. But if you have some fungals, you can really punish that and press the issue against Terran. Whenever your hive is done, taking 3/3 upgrades, melee, taking adrenal glands for your lings, and then adding a nidus is generally good. Nidus means that your LingBane Ultra can be a threat in more locations than just their forward bases. You could nidus the natural, you could nidus the main. And once they have this 5th base, defending the main and the 5th simultaneously is a pretty tall order for Terran. They would have to either build a bunch of turrets at this ridge, which cost them something, or leave some standing defense, like bio or maybe some liberators. So I'm nidusing the main, just giving the Terran a bad time. Continuing to spread creep is important. You would think about creep spread against Terran as sort of a mini-game in the matchup, where creep spreads faster than Legacy of the Void, so Zerg is rewarded more for spreading it, but it also recedes faster, so Terran is rewarded for clearing it. If they're pressing pretty hard to deny your creep, you press back by making maybe a couple more creep queens and making sure you continue to kind of force that APM out of them. If they don't deny your creep, you increase the surface area on the map where you're going to take more favorable engagements. Your units are a lot faster, which means they can get into position to trade really well at an earlier time. Ultra Cavern is done, making ultras. I'm not really in a rush to make Broodlords this game. You could, but if Terran is going pretty heavy into Liberator, Ultra with Corruptor is basically fine. This is just kind of a cute move. My Mutas had 3 Overseers with them, and they had enough energy to contaminate. It's kind of an inconvenience for the Terran production. So, as the Terran pulls their entire army into the main, or at least most of it, I push the 5th base. So think about using Nidus as an opportunity to create an opening elsewhere, rather than saying, I hope this Nidus deals damage here. This Nidus didn't really deal very much damage. The Mutas killed maybe a couple add-ons, but this is really the crucial move that sets the Terran very far behind. The 5th base is very, very important, because by the time they're establishing this, the main and the natural and most of the 3rd is mined out. So they really need to defend this location, and the Nidus put them out of position. So they can't defend that by the time I kill it. If I was paying better attention, I could have fungled all this. That would have been a good move. But for Zerg, if you ever push into their 5th and kill it, and you have a good economy at home, you've basically achieved a win condition. Meaning it's very hard for Terran to sustain production when they don't have income for that long. I'm falling back. Gonna improve my composition even more. More and more Corruptors. Even in the late game, it's pretty good to have a small Mutaflock of around 10, just to deny drops. This is a mistake for me to lose them, but I can kind of capitalize on the positioning of their Liberators by killing the 5th base again. In the late game, it's kind of nice to add a bunch of spores at a base. A lot of times they'll send their Liberators and just siege a location and they can kill the drones really, really fast, but not if you have this spore setup. It's quite safe. A really, really key micro procedure that a lot of players don't do is you have your army in a location, box it in half, and put some of it at a lower side. If you think about an army coming in at this angle, this formation is going to get a better trade than if it was all clumped in one spot. So attacking this 5th base location, think about dividing your forces, some units up here, some units here, and some units here, and you'll likely take a better trade than if you just used one of the paths. So before you go into an engagement, really just anytime your army is at ease, kind of resting on the map, box half of it and then click it away. This makes the units much more prepared to take a good engagement, even if you're not looking at your army at the time. And then here, I Nidus the main again. I didn't actually load any units into the Nidus, so this is just to distract the opponent and pull a bunch of their army while I push the 5th yet again. Nidus doesn't have to be a tactic where you even put any units at all. You can just use it to say, hey, look over here, while you attack really hard with all of your stuff elsewhere. ZvT. Direct and indirect forces, LingBaneMuta into Ultra Corruptor with some Infestors.